The capacity to maintain a sharp, resilient memory well into the later decades of life is not merely a matter of genetic luck, but a biological engineering challenge that can be solved. A specific physiological mechanism exists within the human skull that serves as a nightly cleaning crew, washing away the cellular debris and toxic proteins that accumulate during waking hours and eventually lead to cognitive decline. Most people unknowingly sabotage this critical process by accepting the false narrative that brain fog and fragmented recall are just unavoidable taxes of aging, or that generic sleep aids are a sufficient solution. By leveraging a targeted protocol that combines specific neurochemistry with the brain's natural circadian rhythm, an individual can optimize this waste clearance system to protect neural circuitry for the long term. The hidden waste clearance system of the sleeping brain, the human brain, possesses a specialized plumbing system that functions almost exclusively during deep states of rest, a discovery that has fundamentally shifted the understanding of neurodegeneration and cognitive health. This system, known as the glymphatic system, operates by utilizing the cerebrospinal fluid to flush out metabolic waste products that build up between neurons throughout the day. When the individual enters the deepest phases of slow-wave sleep, the glial cells that support the neurons physically shrink in size, effectively increasing the space between cells by a significant margin. This structural change allows the cleansing fluid to rush through the brain tissue at a much higher volume and velocity than is possible during wakefulness. It is comparable to a municipal street cleaning operation that can only sweep the roads effectively once the heavy traffic of the day has completely ceased. Without this nightly wash cycle, proteins such as amyloid beta and tau begin to accumulate in the neural pathways, forming the sticky plaques and tangles that are the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease and general age-related cognitive decline. The efficiency of this system naturally degrades over time if it is not actively maintained, meaning that a 60-year-old brain requires more deliberate biological support to achieve the same clearance rates as a 20-year-old brain. The biological trigger for this cleaning process is tightly regulated by the presence of adenosine and the overall architecture of sleep, particularly the ratio of deep sleep to REM sleep. Adenosine is a chemical that builds up in the brain the longer a person is awake, creating the sensation of sleepiness or sleep pressure that eventually forces the body to rest. Andrew Huberman often highlights that the management of this chemical pressure is crucial, as interfering with it through late-day caffeine intake or irregular sleeping hours disrupts the precise timing required for the glymphatic valves to open. The process is not a simple on-off switch, but a complex orchestration of neurochemical signals that must occur in a specific sequence. If the individual wakes up frequently or fails to reach the delta wave frequency of deep sleep, the glial cells do not shrink sufficiently, and the cerebrospinal fluid cannot penetrate deep enough to remove the day's waste. This results in a dirty brain the following morning, characterized by difficulty focusing, emotional irritability, and an inability to encode short-term memories into long-term storage. A common misconception is that all sleep is created equal, and that simply being unconscious for 8 hours equates to a restored brain. This belief leads many seniors to rely on sedative medications or alcohol to induce sleep, unaware that these substances severely compromise the quality of the rest they receive. While alcohol may help a person lose consciousness faster, it acts as a potent inhibitor of the very REM and deep sleep cycles needed for the glymphatic system to function. It effectively sedates the cortex without allowing the necessary biological maintenance to occur, leaving the brain in a state of suspended animation rather than active restoration. Similarly, many prescription sleep aids alter the electrical signature of the brain in ways that prevent the natural progression through sleep stages. The goal is not merely sedation, but biological optimization, ensuring that the brain enters the specific electrical states where neuroplasticity is preserved and waste is expelled. The aging individual must view sleep not as a passive pause in activity, but as an active metabolic function that requires specific conditions to perform correctly. The mechanics of this system are further influenced by the physical position of the body and the thermal environment of the sleeping quarters. Research suggests that sleeping on one side may facilitate better lymphatic clearance compared to sleeping on the back or stomach, likely due to the effects of gravity on the flow of cerebrospinal fluid and the position of the neck veins. Furthermore, the brain's ability to cool down is a primary signal for the onset of deep sleep. The body's core temperature must drop by a few degrees to initiate the transition into the restorative phases where the glial cells contract. If the room is too warm or the bedding traps excessive heat, the brain remains in a state of heightened alertness, preventing the deep immersion required for the cleaning cycle to begin. This thermal regulation is a critical component that works in tandem with the chemical drivers of sleep. It is entirely possible for a person to do everything else right, but fail to clear brain fog simply because their thermal environment prevented the necessary physiological drop in temperature. To understand the stakes, one must look at the long-term consequences of chronic lymphatic failure. When the brain fails to wash itself night after night, the accumulation of metabolic debris creates a chronic inflammatory state that attacks the synapses, the connection points between neurons where memory resides. This inflammation does not manifest immediately as dementia, but begins as subtle lapses in executive function, such as trouble finding words, slower processing speeds, and a reduced ability to multitask. Over years, this biochemical neglect causes physical atrophy of the hippocampus, the brain's memory center. However, the brain retains a remarkable capacity for recovery when the correct conditions are restored. By prioritizing the mechanisms of deep sleep, the individual can halt this accumulation and even reverse some of the cognitive slowing associated with aging. It is a process of reclaiming the brain's natural ability to heal itself, turning the nightly rest into a powerful therapeutic intervention. From the perspective of neurobiology, the challenge is to engineer a biochemical environment that mimics the robust sleep signals of youth without relying on sedatives that blunt the process. This requires a precise understanding of which neurotransmitters serve as the brakes for the brain's racing engine. The most critical of these is GABA, the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter that quiets electrical activity and allows the transition into unconsciousness. As people age, the natural production and sensitivity to GABA can diminish, making it harder to switch off the busy thoughts of the day. This is where the concept of night tea or a specific chemical protocol becomes relevant, not as a magic potion, but as a tool to supply the brain with the raw materials it needs to engage these inhibitory pathways. The objective is to gently nudge the brain into a state of high-functioning rest, utilizing compounds that support the natural architecture of sleep rather than overriding it. There are instances, however, where the glymphatic system is compromised by factors outside of immediate control, such as traumatic brain injury or severe sleep apnea. In these cases, the physical pathways for fluid drainage may be obstructed, or the oxygen deprivation from apnea may constantly rouse the brain from deep sleep. It is important to acknowledge that while optimization protocols can significantly improve function, they must be part of a broader health strategy that addresses these structural issues. For the vast majority of people over 60, however, the primary barrier is not structural damage, but a lack of appropriate signaling. The brain is waiting for the right cues to initiate the cleaning process, and those cues are often missing in the modern lifestyle of artificial light, high stress, and dietary inhibitors. By realigning daily habits with biological needs, the path to a clearer mind becomes accessible. In practical terms, this means that the preparation for the next day's cognitive performance begins the moment the sun goes down. The individual learns to recognize the subtle physiological shifts that indicate the brain is ready to engage its cleaning mode. This awareness allows for the implementation of a routine that serves as a biological runway, smoothing the transition from the high beta waves of alert wakefulness to the slow delta waves of deep restoration. It is a proactive stance on aging, where the preservation of memory is treated with the same rigor as the management of blood pressure or cholesterol. The night tea is simply the delivery mechanism for the molecular keys that unlock this powerful regenerative system. How many years of clarity have I sacrificed by treating sleep as an afterthought? The chemical architecture of the ideal nightly elixir, the concept of a tea for brain health, is scientifically grounded in the delivery of specific compounds that modulate the brain's GBergic system. The central ingredient in this protocol, often championed in neurobiological discussions, is apigenin. Apigenin is a bioactive flavonoid found in high concentrations in chamomile, which explains the ancestral wisdom of using chamomile tea as a sleep aid. However, the modern application goes beyond simple folk remedies. It involves understanding that apigenin acts as a mild chloride channel driver. This means it binds to the same receptors in the brain as potent anti-anxiety medications, but it does so gently and without the addictive profile or the suppression of deep sleep. By influencing these receptors, apigenin effectively turns down the gain on the brain's anxiety circuits, quieting the noise of ruminating thoughts that often keep older adults awake. It facilitates the transition into sleep by chemically signaling the neurons to reduce their firing rate, preparing the stage for the glymphatic system to take over. To fully support the aging brain, apigenin is rarely used in isolation within a robust protocol. It is frequently paired with magnesium threonate, a specific form of magnesium that has the unique ability to cross the blood-brain barrier efficiently. While other forms of magnesium, such as citrate or oxide, are primarily effective for muscle relaxation or digestive health, magnesium threonate acts directly on the central nervous system. It creates a state of relaxation at the neuronal level and has been shown to increase the density of synapses, the connections between brain cells. This dual action is critical. It not only aids in the initiation of sleep, but also provides the raw materials for neuroplasticity, allowing the brain to consolidate memories formed during the day. Huberman often points out that many people are deficient in magnesium, and correcting this deficit specifically within the brain tissue can have a profound effect on sleep quality and cognitive endurance. The third pillar of this chemical architecture is typically L-theanine, an amino acid primarily found in green tea, though for sleep protocols, it is isolated to avoid caffeine. L-theanine promotes the generation of alpha brain waves, which are associated with a state of wakeful relaxation, the feeling of being calm but not sedated. This is particularly useful for individuals who struggle with the initial phase of falling asleep due to a racing mind. By encouraging alpha wave production, L-theanine acts as a bridge, helping the brain shift out of the high alert beta state and ease into the theta and delta states required for deep rest. It creates a soft landing for the mind, smoothing out the jagged edges of stress that often accumulate throughout the day. Unlike sedatives that simply knock the user out, this compound works with the brain's natural rhythms to induce a state of readiness for sleep. The combination of these elements, apigenin, magnesium threonate, and L-theanine, creates a synergistic effect that is greater than the sum of its parts. This cocktail addresses three distinct failure points in the sleep process: the inability to shut off anxiety, apigenin, the lack of neuronal relaxation, magnesium, and the difficulty in transitioning from alertness to calm, theanine. For an individual over 60, whose natural production of sleep hormones like melatonin may be diminishing, this chemical support provides a necessary scaffold. It does not replace the body's natural processes, but amplifies the signals that have become faint with age. It is a strategy of modulation rather than sedation, preserving the complex architecture of sleep stages that is essential for the glymphatic washing of the brain. It is important to note the limitations and specific contraindications of this approach. For example, individuals who suffer from night terrors or particularly vivid, disturbing dreams might need to be cautious with L-theanine or high doses of melatonin, as these can sometimes intensify dream activity. Furthermore, biology is highly individual. What works as a profound sleep aid for one person may have a negligible effect on another due to variations in gut absorption or receptor sensitivity. The protocol requires a period of experimentation and tuning, rather than a rigid adherence to a single dosage. The goal is to find the minimum effective dose that yields the maximum restorative benefit, avoiding the more is better trap that often leads to diminishing returns. The method of consumption also matters. While taking these compounds in supplement form is precise, the ritual of a warm beverage, a literal tea made from high-potency chamomile or a blend infused with these nutrients, adds a psychosomatic layer to the protocol. The warmth of the liquid can help raise the internal body temperature slightly, which triggers a compensatory cooling mechanism as the heat dissipates, signaling to the body that it is time to sleep. This creates a Pavlovian response where the act of drinking the tea begins to downregulate the nervous system before the chemicals even enter the bloodstream. It anchors the evening in a sensory experience that separates the stress of the day from the sanctity of the night. Critics of supplementation often argue that a balanced diet should provide all necessary nutrients. While this is ideally true, the concentrations of apigenin in a standard cup of grocery store chamomile tea may vary wildly, and getting therapeutic levels of magnesium threonate from food alone is difficult due to soil depletion and absorption issues in the aging gut. Therefore, while a whole food approach is always the foundation, targeted supplementation acts as an insurance policy for the brain. It ensures that the specific molecules required to open the glymphatic valves are present in sufficient quantities every single night, removing the variability that comes with dietary fluctuations. There is a subtle but crucial distinction between this protocol and the use of exogenous melatonin. While melatonin can be effective for a shifting circadian phase, such as jet lag, taking it nightly can sometimes suppress the body's own endogenous production or lead to grogginess the next day. The apigenin magnesium theanine triad avoids this hormone replacement pathway entirely. Instead of adding a hormone, it modulates the sensitivity of the neurotransmitters that are already present. This makes it a sustainable, long-term strategy for daily vitality that does not create a dependency or desensitize the body's natural receptors over time. It respects the homeostatic balance of the organism. This chemical strategy empowers the individual to take control of their cognitive destiny. It moves the conversation from "I hope I sleep well tonight" to "I have built the conditions for restorative sleep." This shift in mindset, supported by tangible biological tools, reduces the anxiety around sleep itself, which is often a self-fulfilling prophecy for insomnia. When the individual knows they have a reliable lever to pull, the fear of the sleepless night dissipates, further lowering cortisol and promoting the relaxation necessary for the protocol to work. Am I relying on exhaustion to fall asleep instead of preparing my body for restoration? Optimizing the thermal and circadian environment for absorption, even the most potent chemical protocol, cannot overcome a customized environment that is hostile to sleep biology. The efficacy of the night tea and its constituent compounds relies heavily on the presence of external cues that align with the brain's ancient programming. The primary governor of this system is light. Huberman frequently emphasizes that viewing sunlight early in the day is the single most critical factor for setting the circadian clock, but the management of light in the evening is equally vital. After the sun sets, the eyes become incredibly sensitive to photons, particularly in the blue spectrum emitted by screens and LED bulbs. Exposure to this light between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. suppresses the release of melatonin and signals the brain that it is still daytime, effectively slamming the brakes on the sleep transition process regardless of what supplements have been consumed. To create the ideal environment for the protocol to take effect, the individual must engineer a faded light environment in the 2 hours preceding bed. This involves dimming overhead lights or, preferably, switching to floor lamps that cast light upward and use warm-colored bulbs in the red or amber spectrum. These wavelengths have the least impact on the circadian pacemaker. By reducing the intensity and changing the angle of light to lower in the visual field, the brain receives a consistent signal that the day is ending. This environmental shift acts as a permissive gate, allowing the apigenin and magnesium to bind effectively to their receptors without fighting against a contradictory alert signal from the visual cortex. Temperature is the second major environmental lever. As previously touched upon, the body needs to drop its core temperature by approximately 1 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit to initiate and maintain deep sleep. A common mistake is keeping the bedroom too warm or piling on heavy blankets that prevent heat dissipation. The optimal sleeping temperature for most people is surprisingly cool, often around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. This cool ambient air facilitates the transfer of heat from the core of the body to the extremities, a physiological venting process that is a prerequisite for the deep, restorative sleep phases where the glymphatic system is most active. A warm bath or shower before bed can paradoxically help with this cooling. The rapid dilation of blood vessels forces heat to the surface of the skin, where it escapes once the person steps into the cooler air of the bedroom. The timing of fluid intake, including the night tea itself, requires strategic planning. Consuming large amounts of liquid right before sleep can lead to nocturia, the need to wake up and urinate in the middle of the night. This fragmentation of sleep is disastrous for the glymphatic process, which requires consolidated blocks of time to complete its cleaning cycles. The ideal approach is to consume the majority of hydration earlier in the day and to sip the sleep protocol beverage about 60 to 90 minutes before bed. This allows the compounds to be absorbed and the fluid to be processed by the kidneys before the lights go out. It is a delicate balance between delivering the necessary chemistry and maintaining the physical integrity of the sleep out. Anxiety and physiological arousal are often the invisible disruptors that override even the best chemical and environmental preparations. High levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, act as a direct antagonist to the sleep process. If an individual consumes the tea but then immediately engages in a stressful email exchange or watches a distressing news segment, the surge of norepinephrine will neutralize the calming effects of the epigenin. The protocol, therefore, demands a psychological buffer zone, a period of time where stressful inputs are strictly forbidden. This might involve light reading, stretching, or specific breathing protocols like the physiological sigh, 2 inhales followed by a long exhale, to manually downregulate the autonomic nervous system. The concept of sleep pressure must also be preserved. Napping late in the day or for too long can burn off the adenosine that has accumulated, reducing the drive to sleep at night. For the aging individual who may have more leisure time, the temptation to nap can be strong. However, to ensure the night tea works effectively, the person should aim to keep naps short, under 20 minutes, and early in the afternoon, or avoid them altogether. This ensures that when the head hits the pillow, there is a sufficient biological hunger for sleep that works in tandem with the supplement protocol to pull the brain into the deep, cleaning stages of rest. Noise pollution is another variable that often goes unaddressed. While the sleeper may not fully wake up, sudden noises can pull the brain out of deep delta sleep and into lighter stages, interrupting the glymphatic flow. The use of a white noise machine or earplugs can create a sonic firewall, smoothing out the auditory environment. This constant, low-level sound masks sudden interruptions and provides a consistent auditory backdrop that the brain can safely ignore. It is about removing every possible point of friction that could drag the mind back to consciousness before the cleaning cycle is complete. The synergy between the internal chemistry and the external environment creates a fortress of sleep. When the lighting is dim, the room is cool, the noise is dampened, and the stress is managed, the epigenin and magnesium can perform their functions with maximum efficiency. It is not enough to simply swallow a pill or drink a tea. One must build the sanctuary in which that tea can work. This holistic approach ensures that the investment in supplements yields the highest possible return in cognitive health. Occasionally, life circumstances such as travel or family emergencies will disrupt this carefully curated environment. In these moments, the flexibility of the system is tested. The goal is not perfection every single night, but a consistent baseline of high-quality recovery. When the environment cannot be controlled, the behavioral tools, like using an eye mask to block light or practicing non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, protocols, become even more critical to mitigate the damage. The resilient sleeper has a toolkit that adapts to changing conditions while keeping the core biological principles intact. What environmental trigger is currently signaling my brain to stay awake when it should be winding down? Sustaining cognitive clarity through neuroplastic consistency, the true power of this nightly protocol lies not in a single night of perfect sleep, but in the compounding interest of consistency over months and years. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself and form new connections, does not cease at age 60. In fact, the aging brain remains incredibly plastic, provided it is given the correct resources. The glymphatic clearance facilitated by the epigenin magnesium-theanine blend and the supporting environment clears the metabolic noise that inhibits this plasticity. When the brain is free of toxic debris, the machinery for learning and memory consolidation functions with renewed vigor. This allows the senior individual to not only recall the past with clarity, but to actively engage with new information, learn new skills, and maintain a dynamic, evolving intellect. Adopting this routine requires a shift in identity. The individual stops viewing themselves as a passive victim of aging and becomes an active operator of their own biology. This psychological shift is potent. It reinforces the habit, making the preparation of a night tea and the dimming of the lights a sacred ritual rather than a chore. Consistency establishes a strong circadian entrainment. The body begins to anticipate sleep at the correct time, releasing its own cascade of preparatory hormones before the individual even reaches for the kettle. This predictability is exactly what the aging nervous system craves. It lowers the metabolic cost of regulating the body, freeing up energy for immune function and cellular repair. However, one must remain vigilant against the drift. It is easy, after a few weeks of good sleep, to become complacent, to start watching TV in bed again, to skip the magnesium, or to let the room get too warm. The benefits of the protocol are reversible. If the maintenance stops, the waste accumulation resumes. Therefore, the strategy must be viewed as a lifestyle standard, much like brushing one's teeth. It is a non-negotiable hygiene practice for the brain. The individual must be their own scientist, observing which variables yield the best results and adjusting as their body changes. Perhaps the dosage of theanine needs tweaking, or the timing of the evening meal needs to be moved earlier. This ongoing calibration is the hallmark of a sophisticated approach to longevity. The impact of this clarity extends far beyond memory. A brain that is well-rested and free of inflammation regulates emotion better, manages stress with greater resilience, and maintains better motor control. The grumpy old man or fragile senior stereotypes are often manifestations of chronically sleep-deprived brains struggling to cope with daily demands. By securing the foundation of deep sleep, the individual preserves their personality, their patience, and their zest for life. They remain capable of deep engagement with their families and their communities, protected by the invisible shield of a well-functioning glymphatic system. Ultimately, the science points to a hopeful conclusion. The decline of the mind is not an absolute destiny. While we cannot stop the passage of time, we can significantly alter the slope of the descent. By understanding the mechanism of the brain's nightly wash cycle and providing the specific chemical and environmental support it requires, we can protect the seat of our consciousness. The night tea is more than a beverage. It is a commitment to self-preservation, a daily vote for a future where we remain fully present, fully aware, and fully alive. What daily choice am I making that contradicts the future I want for my mind?